Hello, my mother works in an office and I know very well what it's like when your work is devalued. This story is not just content for views, but a reflection of a real experience that can happen to anyone. We are telling it so that you can learn from it and avoid repeating other people's mistakes. All names and companies are fictional.
The moment I knew I wasn't family anymore came wrapped in sage and thyme roasted turkey and fake smiles. My sister's fiancé raised a glass and made a toast about starting new chapters with people who belong. No one looked at me. Not once. I was sitting at the fold-out table in the corner, next to the kids and a wobbly stack of coats, still in my restaurant uniform because I came straight from a double shift. My mom didn't even offer me a plate. Just gave a tight smile and said, "You should have changed." Like I'd shown up in rags, not the embroidered black shirt I'd worn for 12 years at the place that paid for her root canal. That's when it settled in my chest, not a fire, not a cry, just a kind of stillness. Like a door closing behind me and locking on its own. They didn't see me anymore. Or worse, they did and decided I didn't fit their version of a photo-ready life. And maybe that's why I'm finally telling this story. Because 97% of you listening haven't subscribed or liked the video, and believe me, it helps way more than you know. Hit the buttons if this hits something in you. Let's get back to it. See, Hawthorne House wasn't just a job. It was where I learned to sharpen knives, to carry 3 hot plates up a spiral staircase without dropping a garnish, to talk a weeping bride out of canceling her reception when her florist no-showed. It was home in a way that had nothing to do with DNA. And 2 years ago, when Chef Greg pulled me aside after close and said he wanted someone with grit and no ego to take over when he retired, I laughed. Then I cried. Then I read the fine print on the buy-in paperwork so many times I memorized the clauses. I didn't tell my family. Not because it was a secret, but because I knew they wouldn't understand. They thought ownership meant suits and glass offices. Not the woman sweating over creme brulee burners until midnight, with her hands raw from prep and a pencil tucked behind her ear. They never asked what kept me going through 14-hour shifts. They just sent texts like, "Can you sell me $300 for mom's vet bill?" or, "Hey, the basement heater died. Know anyone cheap?" I always came through. And they always acted like I was a little too available. Like a faucet they didn't appreciate until the water ran dry. But this past year, I made my final payment. It cleared on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. No balloon drop. No banner. Just my name going on the LLC filing and a brass key placed gently in my hand by the man who built the place from scratch. I'd never felt more proud. And I didn't breathe a word of it to anyone. I worked a double that Wednesday. Closed the pastry case. Triple wrapped the sea base. Left a note for inventory. And when I got home, I texted my mom, "Hey, what time is dinner Thursday? I can swing by after work, might still be in uniform, but I'll bring pies." Hours passed. Then her reply, "Your sister's new fiancé wants a classy dinner. Please don't show up in your restaurant uniform. It would ruin the photos. No, thanks for the pies. No, can't wait to see you. Just make yourself invisible if you can't be edited into the frame." I sat on the edge of my bed, stared at that text, and felt something harden behind my ribs. Not rage, not sorrow, just resolve. I opened my laptop, navigated to a folder I hadn't touched in months, found the PDF. Clause 14, be harassment or targeted exclusion of staff, may result in immediate cancellation, forfeiture of deposit, and liquidated damages. I'd written the first draft of that clause myself. After a bachelor party tried to grope my hostess and post it on TikTok. That clause was my line in the sand. Signed by Greg. Approved by counsel. Tucked away like a weapon I hoped I'd never need. I didn't know my own mother would hand me the reason to use it. I remember the pies were already boxed when I sent the message. 3 bourbon pecans and 2 sweet potatoes with a brulee top that made grown men tear up. They were lined up on the bakery counter, still warm, little hand-tied bows around each one. I texted Mom between seatings, hands flour-dusted, legs aching from 12 hours on my feet. I told her I'd swing by after close, even if I was still in uniform. And asked what time dinner started. I offered the pies like a peace offering. Like maybe they'd remember who I was underneath the apron. She didn't answer until nearly midnight. And when she did, the words might as well have come from a stranger with her phone. Your sister's new fiancé wants a classy dinner. Please don't show up in your restaurant uniform. It would ruin the photos. That was it. No greeting. No warmth. Just instruction. Like I was a vendor, not a daughter. Like they were hosting a gala and I was the help who'd forgotten her place. I sat there on the walk-in steel bench long after the kitchen lights went off, reading it over and over, like maybe the pixels would rearrange into something that made sense. But they didn't. And that's when I felt it, the pivot. The hard reset. Not rage. Not heartbreak. Just something clean. Cold. Focused. Like snapping a knife back into its sheath. I didn't reply. I didn't explain. I just opened my laptop and found the folder I kept tucked inside a password-protected drive, Hawthorne House event contracts, final drafts approved. Scrolled past bridal tastings and vendor invoices until I landed on the one I'd built from scratch. Clause 14, B. Harassment or targeted exclusion of staff may result in immediate cancellation, forfeiture of deposit, and liquidated damages. It existed because I'd learned the hard way that some people didn't see servers as people. I'd watched a 17-year-old hostess cry in the walk-in after some C-lister influencer called her dish rag on a live stream. I'd watched tips get yanked off trays when men got drunk enough to think we were part of the decor. So I fought for that clause. The owner was hesitant. Said it sounded intense. But I held my ground. Said, if you want people to protect your house, you better give them a lock. It was signed. Sealed, legal, and buried in every private booking we did, including the one scheduled for Thursday night. A family engagement dinner booked under the name Grant Whitmore, my sister's fiancé. I remembered the event request because it came in with a note. Please ensure elegance. Professional photography on site. I didn't connect the dots until now. That's when the clarity sharpened into something heavier. Not spite. Not revenge. Just the weight of knowing what I'd built and how little they ever saw it. I searched the contract system, pulled up the reservation. There it was. Grant's full name, email, contact, event notes, and at the bottom, a standard clause highlighted in yellow, just like the others. They didn't know they'd signed a deal with someone they were actively trying to keep out of the frame. So I did what I always do, I documented. Screenshot the contract, printed a hard copy, pulled the time-stamped reservation, archived the restaurant uniform text from my mother, labeled every file. Because while they were planning centerpieces and photo angles, I was preparing the one thing they never anticipated: consequences. The notification lit up my phone like a warning flare. Please don't come. It's important to keep things presentable. That was the whole message. No punctuation beyond the ellipsis. No emotion. Just the final shovelful of dirt on the grave they'd been quietly digging for my place in the family. I stood there, half-dressed, coat sleeve still dangling off my arm, staring at the screen like it had the nerve to flinch. But it didn't. Neither did I. I just whispered to myself, okay? Message received. And I meant it in every possible way. I took the pies off the counter, still warm, still perfect, and slid them into the staff fridge. Then I clocked in like any other day. Because it was just another day now. No longer a holiday. No longer a dinner I was expected at. Just Thursday with an extra layer of emotional frost. At noon sharp, an email came in from Claire, our events manager. Subject line, tonight's event, final instructions. I clicked it. Booking, Grant Whitmore. Occasion, family celebration/engagement announcement. Guests, 16. Photography, confirmed. Special notes. Please ensure background is clean, no visible staff. Keep that restaurant guy away from our table. Not my name. Not even a please. Just that phrase. That restaurant guy. 12 years of sweat and cuts and Christmas Eve doubles, and I was reduced to a line item of inconvenience. A background smudge they didn't want ruining their little holiday rebrand. I wasn't surprised. Not anymore. But something about seeing it typed out cold, clinical, made the silence in my chest settle deeper, like a weight shifting to its final resting place. I didn't reply to Claire. I didn't call my mom. I didn't even text my sister. I simply walked to the back office, pulled up the reservation contract, and typed one sentence to legal. Please confirm this event's enforcement under Clause 14, B. I attached the screenshot, highlighted the note, included the time-stamped text from my mother. Then I went back to the prep line, tied my apron, and started searing duck breasts like my entire family wasn't trying to Photoshop me out of their life. Funny thing is, they thought they were planning something elegant. Something polished and curated and just refined enough for engagement photos and social media captions. What they didn't realize was that the venue wasn't theirs. It was mine, and their little spectacle had come with a contract, one they signed without reading, because people like Grant never imagined the rules could apply to them. They didn't know who that restaurant guy really was. But they were about to. When the legal reply came in, I was slicing blood oranges into perfect rounds for the salad course. The message buzzed my phone quietly, no drama, no ringtone, just a vibration that told me everything had clicked into place. This qualifies as targeted exclusion and workplace harassment per 14(b). You're authorized to act. I stared at the screen for maybe 5 seconds. Then I set the knife down, wiped my hands, and took a breath so steady it almost scared me. There wasn't even satisfaction in it. Just validation. Like the universe had finally caught up with the part of me that had always known I didn't need to scream to be heard. I walked to the office, sat down in Greg's old chair, typed up the termination notice with the same focus I gave to our nightly prep lists. Subject line: private dining reservation terminated. Policy violation. Recipient: Grant Whitmore. CC'd: the event planner, the internal team, legal. BCC'd myself because I always keep receipts. Due to a confirmed breach of Clause 14(b) of our private event agreement, specifically language indicating exclusion of internal staff and targeted derogatory instruction, the reservation scheduled for November 23rd has been canceled effective immediately. The deposit has been forfeited. Should the client attempt to dispute or interfere with staff following receipt of this notice, liquidated damages outlined in Schedule A will be applied without further discussion. No cursing, no dramatic flares, just firm policy rendered in black and white. I signed it D. Hart, managing partner. Then I hit send. There was a strange kind of silence afterward. Not the kind that follows confrontation, but the kind that comes before a storm. Except this time, I was the storm and they didn't even know it was me bringing the rain. I didn't stay in the office long. Just long enough to forward a copy to the archive and add a sticky note to Claire's desk that said, if they call, route to legal. Don't engage. Then I walked back into the kitchen, tied my apron, and picked up my knife. Because whether or not my family thought I belonged at their table, I still had 16 scallops to sear and 2 quarts of truffle risotto to finish. We had real guests coming in. People who respected the space, the food, and the hands that made it happen. And for them, I was more than just that restaurant girl. I was the one who made the house run. By 4:07 p.m., the first call came through from my mom. Then my sister. Then my dad. Then 2 numbers I didn't recognize, probably Grant using his law firm contacts like battering rams. I let them all ring out. Not because I wanted to be cruel, and not even to prove a point. I just knew what they were going to say. I'd heard it before in softer versions. Just let it go. It's not personal. You know how Grant is. Only this time, the stakes were higher and their grip on the fantasy tighter. The voicemails stacked like cheap china, panic disguised as poise. Mom's voice was brittle, trying for casual. Hey, sweetheart, I think something got mixed up, call me, okay? Dad's was firmer, clipped. We need to talk. Now. My sister didn't bother with pretense. Fix this, or don't bother showing up ever again. Classic. I just watched them come in, each new vibration a confirmation that the center of gravity had finally shifted. They didn't want me, they wanted what I could fix. My access, my role, my compliance. They'd kicked me out of the photo and now were begging me to Photoshop them back into the event. Meanwhile, Claire was forwarding me every frantic email their side was launching at the restaurant inbox. Subject: urgent. Event booking error? Subject: escalating concern. Subject: family matter, please call me directly. And then the real stuff started. Who authorized this? Do you know who Grant's father is? We'll be leaving reviews. We're personal friends with a food columnist. This is a PR nightmare for you. Ah, yes. The classics. What every upscale restaurant hears when someone with a wine cellar and a yacht gets told no, they panic, not because something's broken, but because they've never had to play by rules they didn't write. Claire, bless her backbone, didn't flinch. She forwarded every single one to our legal counsel and BCC'd me on all replies. At 4:52, counsel sent one message back. Contract governs. Policy stands. No wiggle room. No apology. Just the clean, cold edge of law. And in that moment, I didn't feel powerful. I didn't feel smug. I just felt tired. Tired of being the one they called when they needed saving and the one they erased when they didn't. I didn't start a war. I enforced a line they helped draw. Somewhere between the 6th and 7th ignored call, I looked down at the locked screen of my phone and imagined their table, draped in white linen, polished forks, candles flickering just enough for the photographer to capture faux-candid laughter. Only one thing was missing, me. Not a seat saved. Not a plate set. Just an empty space they'd hoped to fill with utility, not humanity. And now? Now there was no restaurant girl to quietly carry the whole thing on her back. There was just silence. And for once, I let it ring. When the call came in, I was torching the tops of the creme brulees, the flame painting golden glass across the sugar like nothing unusual was happening. My headset buzzed. I tapped it with one gloved knuckle and said, "Go." It was our legal counsel, Jenna. Cool voice, sharper than a chef's knife. "They're disputing the forfeiture," she said. "Grant's attorney just emailed. He thinks we'll fold under pressure." I didn't stop working. Just slid another ramekin down the line and asked, "Did you tell them about the damages schedule?" There was a pause. Then a dry, almost joyful little exhale. Not humor, something colder. "They just found it," she said. "And they're not okay. Liquidated damages. $1,200 per hour, starting at 12:01 a.m. for any breach of Clause 14(b), specifically harassment or reputational interference directed at staff or management. It escalated by the hour, automatically billed, no arbitration needed. One of the best protections I'd ever insisted on, born from years of watching staff get humiliated by trust fund tantrums. And here's the kicker. Grant had signed it. He'd even initialed that section, right next to the bold text and timestamp. Because men like him don't read the terms. They assume the world will bend before they do. They skim contracts like they're beneath them and expect exceptions to be made the moment they snap their fingers. But this time, the clock was already ticking. I could almost picture it, his lawyer, late in the day, scanning the PDF and going pale as they hit the Schedule A page, realizing each panicked call, each aggressive email had been logged, timestamped, cataloged, and now priced. 6 hours remained. Every minute they delayed was money lost. And not metaphorical money, actual, invoice-ready money. Signed by the same man now frantically trying to claw back dignity he never earned. Back in the kitchen, I handed off the desserts and washed my hands. My reflection caught in the metal of the sink, no makeup, apron smudged, hair tied back, eyes steady. This was the face they didn't want in their photos. This was the woman who'd built the very space they were now begging not to be locked out of. I checked my inbox. Sure enough, another email from Grant's assistant, flagged urgent. We would appreciate a quick call to resolve this matter amicably before things escalate unnecessarily. Too late for that. The escalation wasn't personal, it was procedural. He didn't understand that because men like him only see rules when they're enforced. Until then, their suggestions meant for other people. People without last names that open doors. People who don't get to rewrite endings. But I had written this one. Quietly. Legally. Ironclad. And now, with every tick of the second hand, the story was shifting in real time. Not with rage. Not with yelling. Just with a clock. And a clause. And a name at the bottom of a contract he didn't even bother to read. At 8:41 sharp, my phone chimed new email. The kind that starts with your full name and no warmth. I recognized the sender before I even opened it. Grant Whitmore. Subject: Quick fix / misunderstanding. Body. Hey, there's been a confusion. I'm sure we can resolve this. Please call me so we can clear the air. No one wants unnecessary conflict on a holiday. There it was. Not an apology. Not accountability. Just a vague shrug of responsibility hidden behind expensive grammar. Negotiation dressed as courtesy. Like this was a scheduling error, not a systemic act of erasure. I stared at it for maybe 3 seconds, then clicked forward and sent it to Jenna with no comment. She replied to him before I could finish my espresso shot. All terms remain enforceable as executed. Further contact should be directed through counsel only. That was it. Cold. Clear. Final. I didn't feel triumphant. Just intact. Like a house that had survived the storm and bolted the windows after. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. It was my mother. No words. Just a photo. The dining room table, plates lined up like soldiers, napkins folded with Pinterest precision, candles lit just enough to reflect off the crystal. And my chair, unmistakably empty, framed with intent. Like the vacancy itself was supposed to say something. Under the image. Are you happy now? I stared at that message longer than I care to admit. And the truth? No, I wasn't happy. But I was free. Free from performing the version of myself they preferred. Free from softening my boundaries for the sake of family decorum. Free from being useful but unseen. I didn't reply. Not because I wanted her to suffer, but because for the first time, the silence didn't belong to them. It belonged to me. The rules had been written. The lines signed. And now, they were trying to claw their way back into a space they had mocked me for inhabiting. Pretending the rules were flexible, that I was still the daughter who'd show up with warm pies and let them off the hook. But I wasn't. I was the woman whose name sat at the bottom of a contract they thought didn't matter. And this time, the only door that mattered was locked from the inside. The knocking started before I'd even had my first sip of coffee. Not polite, not rhythmic, just fists slamming into it like the building was on fire. I opened the door and there they were. My parents looked like they hadn't slept, like the storm they'd tried to control turned on them overnight. My mother's coat was buttoned wrong, her hair still curled from the night before but deflated. My dad's mouth was already moving before I could speak. What did you do? Behind them stood my sister, eyes rimmed in red, fists clenched like she was still clinging to the version of the evening where I showed up, stayed quiet, and smiled for the camera. And next to her, Grant, looking like someone had just informed him he'd be audited by the IRS and God on the same day. My mother's voice cracked as she pushed through the doorway. We need answers. Right now. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just stepped aside and said, "Come in." They barreled past like they were the victims. Like my apartment, the one they never visit, never ask about, was suddenly theirs to storm because the narrative didn't go their way. My sister stopped cold when she saw the table. Papers still spread from the night before, contract copies, legal printouts, a highlighter resting across the clause. My Hawthorne house carrying next to my coffee mug. And above it all, hanging crooked but proud, the framed certificate of ownership I'd quietly mounted last Friday. She turned toward me like I'd pulled off a con. You ruined everything. You embarrassed us. Do you even realize what you've done? Before I could answer, Grant stepped closer. His eyes scanned the room, jumped from document to detail, and for the first time since I'd known him, he looked like he might actually understand what gravity felt like. His gaze landed on the framed certificate. Managing partner, Hawthorne House. Danielle Hart. His lips parted. You're Danielle Hart, he said slowly, like the name finally meant something. You're the managing partner. The silence that followed didn't feel quiet, it felt loud. Like it filled every inch of the room and pressed against the walls. My dad's shoulders dropped. My mom blinked at me like I'd betrayed her by becoming something without permission. My sister's jaw locked, her fury now mixed with disbelief. What is he talking about? My mom asked, like I'd staged a prank. Grant answered, voice low and strained. She's not staff. She owns the restaurant. The whole cancellation? The policy? That came from her. No one spoke for several long seconds. Just the sound of a heater kicking on in the background and the quiet hum of my espresso machine. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just stood there, grounded in the one thing they'd refused to see. I wasn't theirs to use anymore. They didn't just cut me out of a dinner. They'd tried to cut me out of my own life. And now, the reality was settling in with the weight of a final verdict. The girl in the background had built the room. My dad sank into the nearest chair like the weight of the air had turned solid. His anger had nowhere left to go. It crumpled into confusion, then embarrassment, then something close to grief. Like he was mourning the version of me they'd kept in the utility drawer, pulling her out when they needed something fixed and shoving her back in when company came. My sister stared, lips parted, 1,000 arguments flashing behind her eyes, but not one strong enough to survive the truth on the wall. She looked at the certificate, then at me, then at the papers on the table like they were written in a language she'd never learned. Grant cleared his throat, trying to claw back some kind of upper hand. Look, if we can just reverse the cancellation, we can. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. No. One syllable. No apologies. No wiggle room. I walked to the desk, pulled out the printed contract, still crisp, still legal, and set it on the table like a closing argument. You told them my uniform would ruin the photos, I said, eyes locked on my mother. So I made sure I wasn't in them. Her face folded inward like she'd been slapped with nothing but honesty. Not rage. Not manipulation. Just a mirror held up too cleanly to ignore. No one defended themselves. Not this time. There wasn't a tantrum or a guilt trip. No sudden confessions or cries for forgiveness. Just the small sound of realization settling into the creases of their pride. They left 10 minutes later. No slamming doors, no dramatic exits. Just a quiet retreat, like they were leaving a place they'd only just realized didn't belong to them. By Monday, the invoice was paid. Not because they respected me. Not because they learned. But because Grant's lawyer told him what men like that listened to. Fighting it would cost more. And Friday? Friday, the buy-in finalized. My name etched permanently on the documents they'd tried to ignore. Danielle Hart, managing partner. No longer waiting for permission to matter. I unlocked the front door of Hawthorne House that night with the same keys I'd used for years, but they felt different in my hand now. Lighter. Like they opened something more than just a restaurant. They opened a space where I was never again just that restaurant girl. I was the one who wrote the rules. And they finally heard the line they couldn't unhear. 2 weeks later, the dining room looked nothing like Thanksgiving. The candles were crooked, the silverware didn't match, and half the chairs were pulled from storage and wobbled if you shifted wrong. But every seat was filled. Line cooks with arms scarred from fryer baskets. Bartenders still smelling faintly of bitters and lime. Hosts in hoodies, dish guys in band shirts. People who had seen me on my worst days and didn't need me to be presentable. They just needed me to show up. And I did. We called it Friendsgiving, but it felt like something bigger. Like a celebration we hadn't known we'd earned. We ate roasted chicken thighs with crispy skin, buttery mashed potatoes no guest would ever see, and pies that never made it to that other table. The bourbon pecan ones I'd boxed up weeks before. Still perfect. We passed food around like it was communion. Laughed like survivors. Told stories from the kitchen we'd never say in polite company. One of the new servers, still wearing her apron, sauce on her sleeve, lifted her phone and said, "Hold still, this is too good." She snapped a photo. I didn't pose. Just sat at the head of the table, clean shirt rolled at the elbows, hair tied back, the restaurant keys resting next to my hand like punctuation. The restaurant posted it the next morning. Grateful for our team. Grateful for our home. Simple. True. I didn't expect it to matter. Not to anyone outside the building. But then the notification started. Comments. Messages. One from a mutual acquaintance I hadn't spoken to in months saw the Hawthorne House post. "You look strong." And then I got the text from my sister. No words. Just a screenshot of the post. For the first time, she couldn't crop me out. Couldn't tell me to change my clothes or stand somewhere else. Couldn't hide my name behind a job title that made her feel taller. There I was, center frame, surrounded by people who saw me, not what I could do for them. And she knew it. She knew that while she'd been chasing curated perfection and hiring photographers to catch a version of herself she could live with, I'd been building something real. something that didn't need filters or approval. They wanted a classy dinner. I built a legacy. And this time, no one got to control the frame.